Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Vinny. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here today.
You're an ecologist and entomologist, is that right?
Yeah, correct. I did a PhD in ecology about eight years ago. So I finished about 8 years ago. And I guess I've been working with insects much longer than that. With
You caught the bug.
iNaturalist. Sorry, yeah, that's right. While I've been a member of iNaturalist for about 10 years, I really only have been using it like actively for about 5 or 4. And I think partially prompted by these community events that are organized by councils like the City Nature Challenge and the Melbourne Blitz, which really kind of bring you into action, into wanting to collect observations for a good reason.
Yep. And what got you started with iNaturalist? What was the first thing you, do you remember what your first ID was?
Oh, my first ID. Actually, I used to be part of another community, Bowerbird, a Victorian or Australian initiative. And so at some stage, I had collected a lot of records there, and someone suggested to kind of migrate my records from Bowerbird into iNaturalist. So I got contacted, and that's how I got into iNaturalist. And I thought, wow, what a powerful tool. And that just started the whole thing, the whole adventure of iNaturalist. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, I really hope this night inspires and gets people involved in going on their own adventure. I'm keen to see where mine takes me.
Okay, so look, this is a talk about iNaturalist, so definitely we'll be learning a lot about iNaturalist. And so, yeah, welcome to this webinar. And it's a really pleasure to be here once again and having the opportunity to kind of discuss in more detail how can you use iNaturalist from the scratch, from the beginning, from the most essential things about how to use iNaturalist, but also use it with a good reason, which is this Melbourne Biodiversity Blitz 2022 that's going to happen all across the month of September. So there'll be plenty of opportunities to use it for this good reason across September. Now, this is a slide here to just kind of like center what we'll be doing today and this idea of the Melbourne Biodiversity Blitz. And this physically, right, its presence, web presence sits as a project in iNaturalist. And we're going to absolutely, during the talk today, we're going to cover this. But this is sort of how it looks. And you get here in the description, you see the councils and shires that are participating. And I just want to draw your attention to the fact that all of these kind of like measurements here, observation, species, identifier, observers are empty. They're at 0. So this is kind of like really exciting because this is the night before. It's kind of like the night before Christmas. It's a few hours before the event officially starts at midnight. And then after that, all these numbers are going to start to being populated. And after a month, we hope to see, right, like thousands of observations and hopefully thousands of species. So this is a really good reason to join iNaturalist, join this project, and I'll show you how to do that so you can keep track of how the event is unfolding. And I'll show you later on how this will be stratified by council, so you get a little bit of a really healthy, interesting, and fun competition amongst the different LGAs. So we'll get back to this in a moment. So this is a little bit of an outline for the talk today. I will definitely try to cover these 7 points, and hopefully this will just lead to more interesting threads and conversations. And with your questions, then we might cover all the things that you might be interested in. I want to cover first this idea that iNaturalist is synonymous with big data, right? You probably all heard that term. It's just this idea that it's global and that you're contributing to something really, really big with each one of your observations. So let's look what that actually means. So again, for those of you who are used to using iNaturalist, but we'll definitely all be there today, this is the map of the total number of observations that have been collected in iNaturalist since the project started. And you can see, right, that by looking at the red dots, that it's really global. Yeah, and when you start seeing at the density of dots, you can see things like how well represented, the contribution of Australia is, both in the West and the East. But yeah, over 100 million records. I found that really impressive. Of those, about 4 million have been collected here in Australia. So where does all this data go outside of iNaturalist? If you're not already impressed by this kind of like amount of data that is being collected here in iNaturalist. The idea is that these biodiversity knowledge then flows into larger repositories, right? So one of the ones that it flows to is the Atlas of Living Australia, that then has in itself over 100 million records of Australian biodiversity species. And so you can see these numbers here. These numbers are fresh. I have updated them a few hours before the webinar for you, so we get a sense. And so, for example, iNaturalist 1 year ago, before I gave the same talk a year ago, was at 80 million records. So in a year, there's been 40 million records contributed to iNaturalist, just like people like yourself, myself, and everyone just contributing their observations. Now, I guess more importantly, after it flows into our Knoll National Repository, it then flows into a global repository called, this is what this means here, the Global Biodiversity Information Facility. You can look them online. And this is where the records for the rest of the world, everything goes and sits in this big scientific repository of data. And you can see here that, for example, almost 8,000 publications, scientific peer-reviewed publications, have been published using this data set. That means that any observation that you make during the BioBlitz, for example, could potentially contribute to a scientific publication. And then we're sitting around now as a species, as a human species, we're sitting about 2 billion records. I love that. And you can see again how well connected and how dense the number of records has been. The contribution of Australia here has been pretty big. Excellent. So I hope that gives you a sense of the contribution that you can make to the scientific community and to the biodiversity sort of repository community. I hope that's enough for you to be convinced that it's worth becoming an iNaturalist community member if you're not already. And so I want to show you how to do that very quickly, because I get a sense that while some of you are already members, some of you might be interested in becoming members. So it's really easy. You just have to sign up using this web address here, or just searching for iNaturalist. So this is kind of like the page that you will see the first time if you are not already a member. And like with any other platform, it's going to ask you to create an account, right? So you go through that regular process of creating your account. And so once you have that, you can then use that both to sign up on your web, on your computer, on your laptop or computer, but also on the app on your phone. And I recommend that you do both, because there's different aspects to each one of the tools. So for example, by having the app in your phone, as I'll show you in a moment, you can collect records using your phone's camera, right? And then maybe you would rather go home and have a cup of coffee and sit down and then curate and observe and see what's happening to your observations with a much larger screen at home. So there's advantages to both. So all I will say about this is that once you have installed your app in your phone, that you sign in using the same credentials that you use when you created your account in your computer, or you can do it the other way around too. Okay, so that's it. That's how you become a member. Once you have become a member, then obviously you would want to have kind of like your presence, right? And I'll show you what that means. I think this is very analogous to any other platform that you might be used to, Facebook, Twitter, or any other social media that you might have been exposed. So what I'm going to do now is go live to my own computer to show you how all this works. Okay, so as you can see, I'm in my tab, I'm on iNaturalist. Right now, my iNaturalist is filtering by Australia, and you can see these 4 million records that I mentioned before. And yeah, so this is where the exciting things start. Okay, now if you click here in the iNaturalist little logo up here, okay, I'm going to do that now. You get access to all this other kind of like summaries and tabs that you can use. And as you can see, there's one for your profile. Okay. So I really invite you to use this editing function here to, for example, go in, and if you want to have a little icon or a photo, that's where you can do that. You can create a little blurb of yourself, which is really useful for people to get a sense of, it might be something as simple as, oh, I'm a first-time user. I'm really excited to participate in the Melbourne Blitz. Or, oh, I have a passion for plants, or I really love insects, or maybe some of you are really good at identifying birds. So you might say, I have 10 years of experience identifying birds. I'm happy to provide species identification for birds, for example. And then as you can see, like following very standard approaches, you can follow people, or people can follow you, so you can keep track of people that have common interest. You can have even favorite taxa. And I want to show you something that is really, really interesting, which is these summaries here, right, that give you a sense of what you have accomplished, right? So for example, I'm a little bit short of 10,000 observations, and those observations have contributed or are represented by almost a little bit above 2,000 species. So that's quite exciting, right? Because you might make, 50 records and have 40 species, or you can make 5,000 records and that contributes 500 species. So I think it's really easy. These tallies are quite exciting. So if you click on species there, iNaturalist is going to produce a summary for you. For example, if you're interested in the tree of life and phylogenetics, it will give you the spread of your observations across the tree of life. That's pretty exciting. And it will also create summaries here, a view of all the species that you have taken. So for example, right now, mine are ordered by most observed. And this gives me, but also you, because you can go into anyone's profile and check what they've been doing. Here it is. The most commonly observed species for me is the European honeybee. And then these flowers here and this butterfly and so on, right? So you get a sense that I am mostly taking photos of insects and plants, for example. And for some of you, it will be totally different, right? It will be about marine species or birds or lizards, or what have you. Anyway, so it's this really interesting section of iNaturalist where you play with your profile. So I might ask Nicole whether there's any questions or any comments at this stage.
Yes, we've got one question from Sue, which you might cover towards the end, but I can always air it now. So Sue's asked, are all uploads from participating shires to iNaturalist counted, or do existing iNaturalist members need to be registered separately for the Bio Blitz?
Oh, no, good. Let's cover that right now. Yes, so it works both ways, I suppose. Any iNaturalist member, whether they are aware of the event or not, the Melbourne Bio Blitz specifically, if they take a record in the area that of the participating councils, the record will count toward this specific event. And so having said that, it means that if you're a registered iNaturalist member and you do it on purpose during that time frame, it will definitely count for the event. But yeah, you need to be registered in iNaturalist and have an account and take an observation and curate your observations as we will show today. Anything else?
No, that's fine. You can keep going. There's no other questions at the moment. Excellent.
All right. Yeah, so feel free to use the Q&A option to pop in any questions. I'll make a little stop again, a little break in a little while, and that way we don't have to wait to the very end if you have a pressing thing that you want to be answered. All right, so let's go, now that you have your profile and you have become a member, let's go into how do we make observations. Okay, so before I go here, I want to do something, because this might take a little bit. So I'm going to go back into iNaturalist, and I want to show you how to upload observations that might have not been taken directly with your app on your phone, say, example, with your camera, or you might have taken with your phone, but you didn't want to use the data in the field. So it might be situations where you would prefer to be at home and upload your records. And that's, for example, in my case, it's kind of like half and half. So I want to show you how that works. So you have this very distinct green option here that says upload. Okay. And then you just have to choose your files, or you can drop them. And so in my case, these are sitting here. All right, and I'm going to leave them there because it might take, well, they uploaded pretty quickly. That's, and if they uploaded really quickly, but I'm going to leave them sitting there, and then we can come back to them. So I thought they're going to just take a little bit to upload. So first things first, when do we want to be taking records? So you can take records once you become a member of iNaturalist anytime, but I suppose that for the specific objectives of this project, it's during September of this year. And you can see here in the map how incredibly large is this area where here in southeastern Melbourne where you can collect records from. So this is the same area as last year, but with the difference that this year we have Bayside here that has joined the project. And I'm really excited about that because I am actually talking to you today from Bayside, where I live. And that means that this year around, I can go to my favorite local reserves and parks and make observations locally. And those photos that I showed you before that are going to be uploading are from a local reserve. So yeah, you can see that, if you're not part of this area, you just need to come or visit any place within this area to contribute records for this event. So I guess the thing is whether you want to be taking photos with a conventional camera, as you can see here, I'm taking a photo here with my son, or you want to be taking photos with your app in your phone. And this is a sort of a citizen science event that I helped organize where we were all out there making records of pollinators and we all had our phones. So it's kind of like a direct upload into iNaturalist. So let's go see first how that works with the camera. So with the camera, I was showing you how you go up here and you upload files that are already sitting in your computer. And this is sort of like a very critical step. And I want to show you what I mean by that, because the first thing that you want to be sure of is that all your records have a location, right? So you can see here that you have three kind of like fields. You have species name, date, and location. Well, the species name you can do afterwards. The moment you upload your records, you want to make sure that they have a date and a location. And this will happen automatically with your phones, but it does not happen automatically with the upload here function. So let's go into location. That's how it's a good way to do the location, right? So you saw I'm going to do that again. I just clicked on top of the location bar here. And iNaturalist opened this really easily use interactive map. So I'm going to search for George Street Reserve, which is the specific reserve where I took these photos here. So like I just had to type that there, and there, even with a typo, it came up. Okay, and then that's it. This is, I'm going to zoom out so you get a sense. Oh, good. I'm glad that I checked because this is not the site that I was hoping it would be. So that's a good way of, so see, this is somewhere in South Australia. So that's not what we're after. Well, let's try something different. I'm going to go into the suburb of Black Rock. And I'm going to manually find the reserve where I took these photos because I know where it was. So it's up here. And I hope you can see here, George Street Reserve, right? So that's all you need to do, really. Like you can type in if you know a location and it pops up with iNaturalist, or you can just look at it the way you would do in Google Maps or something else. So here is George Street Reserve. And I'm going to click. And so you have this little circle here. And then all you need to do is make that circle sort of sit within the boundaries of that park. For example, this is something that you don't want to do it that big because it goes beyond, right? So the system is going to interpret that you might have taken that photo here in this house, which is not part of the reserve. So you want to make it at least as small. If you were aware that your photo was from, say, this little corner here in the reserve, so you can zoom in further in and then say, okay, there, for example. All right, so we just set that location there, for example. And another very interesting thing that a lot of people ask about is the privacy of your photos. So if for any reason you would prefer your photos not to be, your observations not to be private, then you can change that here to obscured or fully private. If you set them to fully private, they're not going to be part of the event. They're not going to be shared with the public. So they will just be for you to see totally privately. If you obscure them, it's going to create sort of a larger circle. So then when someone from outside of your own account sees your observations, they can't really pinpoint with any kind of precision where the photo was taken. In any case, I have no problems making my photos open. So I'm going to upload that. And you can see now that now all of the photos have a record. Okay. So let's go with the date. Sometimes with most of the photos, somehow your camera might have this field already there, but in this case it isn't. So we want to go back to October of 2020, right? That's the day I took the photo on the first day of October, and then that's, you got your records there, okay? And the last thing I want to do here is this other very important component of iNaturalist, which is an observation is not directly matched with a single photo all the time. Sometimes you have multiple photos that contribute to one single observation. So in this case, that's for in this case that I'm showing you as an example, right? These are photos that were taken the same day in the same place and in sort of even around the same plant sometimes. So for example, this beetle here that I'm highlighting here is just taken minutes, or was taken sort of in that same kind of batch of photos that I took that morning. So I click on both of them and I select this function here, combine. Okay, and you saw there that then these two, both images become, so 2 of 2, 1 of 2, they become a single observation. Okay, and that's really important because you don't want to be uploading a whole bunch of different photos as different observations when they belong technically to a same single observation. Okay, so now I just have to submit my observations. It's going to remind me that they haven't still been curated to species. I haven't said what species they belong to. We'll do that later. And now it's going to take a little bit of time and upload these observations, and we'll be back to them in a moment. So the second pathway is the pathway that you might do with your phone. Okay, so this is how it looks. I just have 4 consecutive screen images from my phone, from the app in my phone. So this was a while ago when I had about 4,000 observations. And the most, obviously you have the camera option here, which is what you will click, right? And the moment you click that, iNaturalist talks to the camera in your phone. And you just have to say, well, okay, I want to take a camera. I want to do no photo. That could be an option, for example, or something that's already saved in your own phone and you want to upload it. But say you want to make a new observation. So you click that, talks to the camera. This is a very strange record of a whale that I found in my own garden, right? So I thought definitely worth, a record of an observation of a whale in my garden is something worth doing. So I took that record there. And as you can see, what happens is that it pops up here in this first one of potentially multiple photographs that will represent that record. And then obviously, because it was taken with the phone, then all the metadata, the date, the exact location, and everything else populates automatically. So that's a great advantage of just making observations with your phone. And you just have to click share. So actually, I'm gonna go to iNaturalist. As I said, sit. Now the new version has record sound. We'll talk about that in a moment. Camera. And I just made an observation of some flowers here sitting next to me. And I'm going to share that. So we'll go into my account and you will see that that record that I just made here using my phone is sitting as the last record that I've taken. All right. So I'm doing that now live. So now I have clicked here, as you saw, your observations, so my observations, and it's pretty interesting. Again, it gives you a summary of the things that I have done or that I have contributed to. And see how interesting it is that while taking these 9,000 observations, happens that I've seen, like they've literally seen over 2,000 species, right? I find that fascinating, like this idea that you can keep a track of the things that you have seen or interacted with in nature. But also, it means that over 1,000 people around the world have somehow interacted with my observations and contributed identifications. So a very strong social kind of means of making, like your observation something socially meaningful. And so this is the map. So you can see how these dots, I'll move it here. So like, obviously, most of them have been taken in Victoria. So you can see, and here's like a little bit of, you can see where I have traveled to or driven to or flown to. But I find it really useful to use this grid as opposed to the map. So if you click grid here, this is where you can actually see profiles of each one of your observations. And as you can see, this is the last kind of mock little example that I did. I will delete this in a second, just so you can see that photo that I took with my phone just now. And then this recent batch of photos that I just uploaded today as I spoke to you, this ones that say unknown. I wanted you to mark the difference between these that say unknown and these other ones that are already been identified to species from early on this week. So we'll get back to how do we change these from unknown to actual species, and how the iNaturalist community of identifiers contributes to that. But before I get there, I'm gonna stop for 1 second and take some questions potentially that Nicole might have from you.
Yeah, so we have our first question, just asking if observations can be uploaded without photos, as some species can be identified through their call, like frogs or birds.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I'll show you, there's a slide to talk about that, but the answer is yes, and that's the newer versions of iNaturalist in your phones have that option of recording a sound as opposed to taking a photo. And we can actually do a mock. I'll do one in a second so you can see how that looks.
And we just have another question from Emma asking, what's the most interesting or rare or unique observation that you have seen out of those thousands that you've observed?
Oh, well, thanks. That's, one of the things with iNaturalist is that, you're very likely to make very unique observations. So, in a recent trip to South Australia, that was, some of those records that I was showing you in the map before, we were in sort of fairly remote outback areas and documenting fairly rare vegetation that normally, I guess just because of the remoteness of it, don't get that kind of like level of frequency of observations from a lot of people. So it happened to be that in that one single trip, I ended up collecting a lot of first records of plants for iNaturalist. So that was very exciting because you get back home, you upload your record, and somewhere a local botanist contributes the identifications, and then you can zoom in the map and realize, this is the first photo of iNaturalist of this species. And then you can actually then use that photo that photo becomes automatically the profile photo of that species in iNaturalist. So it's quite an exciting thing, and it could happen to any one of us, really, just to be sort of in the right place and make a good observation that someone else can identify.
And that's all the questions for now. And just a comment from Sue that it's a, oh, sorry, I'm muting myself. Just another comment from Sue saying it was a great presentation that you're doing, and it's very helpful. But yeah, we can keep going.
Excellent, thanks. And thanks, Sue, for the comment. So, so on the note of making observations and the same thread of making multiple observations, making multiple photographs into a single observation, is this idea that doing that can contribute for your photos to become more identifiable, right? And so these are kind of like three kind of like advice that I would strongly suggest you follow to go a little bit beyond what you might perceive as, oh, this is very clear. It's very clear to me that this is what I wanted to photograph. But then experts, people who have these kind of talent to identify records might suggest, oh, you could have taken a photo from a different angle, for example, or it would have been right if you had stepped 3 steps back and take a photo of that thing in the context of the landscape. That helps us understand where it was placed. So let's get into them and reinforce that idea that it's actually multiple photos that make a good observation, not a single photo. So get closer, right? With plants, it's a really typical example. You might frame a photo of this sort of climbing shrub here in this image to the left, but potentially the only means to identify some plants is taking details of their flowers, of their seeds, of the shape or structure or texture of the trunk, of the bark. So it really helps to get closer and try to take details of things when you make an observation. And I'm sure you're thinking of 1,000 examples where this will apply. Now, sometimes it's not about being closer, but once you're closer, what you are at the right distance to take multiple angles, right? So for example, for identifying this bee, it might be critical to get a sense of the length of the antenna, for example, or some details on the wings, right? But it also potentially be critical to get a sense of the abdomen here. So these are photos taken literally seconds after each other. And you might think, well, this is a good photo, this is a bad photo. But from the point of view of the identification, yeah, just think outside of the box and think, well, the more angles that I have, the better, even if you're not aware of what the details that the expert might need. So a really good example is when I started uploading photos of mushrooms, I used to have a very frontal kind of top image because I thought this is great. You can see the mushroom from the top. And at most, I will take a photo from the side. But then I was advised very quickly, oh, could you please start taking photos from below? We would love to see the gills of the mushroom from below. And I know that can be challenging, but that different angle really contributes to identification. So people have become creative and suggest things like, well, use a mirror or use the selfie option of the camera to kind of like, or just get the angle right there. And so there's all kind of creative things that you can do to get that different angle. And another one that I find potentially the most important one is the frame and the focus, right? So a lot of times we're out there and we might take a photo that is not fully sharp. And then that really kind of hinders identification because there's a lot of details that need to be seen to move something from, say, family to genus or from genus to species. And the frame, of course. So look at this example here where it's not fully clear if you tried, here I was trying to take a photo. Is it not fully clear if I wanted to take a photo of the insect itself or of the plant? So I sat there, I waited a little bit, and then eventually the bug moved into the frame of the photo that really contribute to identification. So in this case, I might be able to say the family of this bug or the order, some of really top level identification, but with this, I could potentially go down to genus and potentially species. So yeah, the frame and the focus are really important components of making good identifiable photos. And then I'll finish this section with this question about audio files. So as I mentioned, while maybe 90% of the records in iNaturalist are photographic images, it now has the functionality to record sounds as well. So even this weekend, I was up in the Yarra Ranges, and there was a pond, and the frogs were there making their calls. So I took out the app, and instead of clicking on the observe, I clicked on record audio, and I recorded a little clip, 8 seconds or 10 seconds of the frogs calling. And then within 2 days, someone with the expertise had identified the frog for me. And now that helps me learn the calls, and I can play them back again. And it's a really powerful tool if you're interested in calls. So that could be anything, right? I'm sure you're thinking of birds and frogs and what else, right? Other things, if you have someone who can identify that or by sound. Okay, so now that we have made observations, and that counts, right? Audio or photographic observations. This is potentially the key step, right? Because I guess as iNaturalist, iNaturalist member, you can contribute in at least two very fundamental ways. You can contribute observations, but you can also contribute identifications. And I think it's fun to do a little bit of both. But I will say this, at the minimum, you're sort of responsible for your own records, for your own observations, to curate them, to provide an identification to the level that you are comfortable with. And so let's see what that means. So I'm going to go back now to these observations that I recently uploaded. Okay. And as I said, this is what I say, this is a batch of observations that has not been curated. Because I say that because they're still at the unknown. And I'm going to click in this first one here. So this photo has not been fully curated. And as you can see here, it has a tag that says needs ID. And we'll discuss that too. So the ways of interacting or curating your own observations, right? Now, I don't want to do this in the field as I showed you before. I'd rather come home and do it, is by suggesting an identification, okay? So you come here and you say, so you type in, for example, I typed in the scientific name, but I could have typed dragonflies or damselflies. And then iNaturalist immediately populates this with the options. So I click that there, done. Now I can safely say that I have curated my image because I have provided that level of identification that I am comfortable with, that I am 100% sure this is either a dragonfly or a damselfly, right? Some of you might know whether it's a dragonfly or a damselfly. And maybe some of you already know the genus or the species. So I hope that you would log in and find my record and contribute that, that kind of further down identification, right? So other things that you can do that are really interesting are these annotations. So, everyone will decide whether they want to interact with this part or not, depending on the time that you have. But at the minimum, I like saying things when I know, for example, the life stage or, if it's good to acknowledge that you would, when you were there, the thing was dead. For example, in this case, I'm totally positive that it was alive. I don't know the sex, and I'm not totally sure about with dragonflies, whether they are adults. Sometimes they are in an intermediate stage that they have wings that they're not fully adult. So I'll leave that one for now. Let's move to another one. Let's do a few. Okay, look, excellent. So in the time since I uploaded this photo, someone has already, so 7 minutes ago, while we were doing this webinar live, this person has contributed, this iNaturalist member has contributed that species, okay? So that's great, because look what's going to happen. The species is there, and it still says it needs ID. This is because iNaturalist needs this community approach to identification, where for a new record, you need at least 2 individual, separate, unique identifications. So what I'm going to do now is that, because I am positive this species is the Australian painted lady, it's a species that I know well across many years of doing surveys, I'm going to agree with, yep. So now I'm also suggested the same identification, and my record has moved on into research grade, which is excellent. This means that the record flows into the Atlas of Living Australia, and it also flows into the Global Information Facility, and it's of research quality. Let's try another one. Oh, that went back. Well, look, the same person knows this species to genus, which is great, because I would have not known this species to genus. So then I can't move this species forward. I just have to, I can't agree with this because I'm not positive this is it. I could learn about it in time, but for now I leave this record as it is, and hopefully someone else will come and provide the species. Well, excellent. This same person again has contributed observations. So obviously someone who knows about insects, which is great. But look, this is another example of a record that has not been curated, and that I am still responsible for curating at least a level, right? So I recognize this as a beetle, but I don't know anything else about it. So beetles gives me the order, scientific order. And then, for example, I can recognize that it is an adult. So I curate my record, and then so on and so forth. So just one last example. So I do agree that this is a fly that I totally agree that this is in that genus. So I agree with this person, and I know it's an adult. So excellent. So on and so forth. So once you have uploaded a batch of records, you go in and you do your identifications and you do your annotations. And that way you have sort of in a very responsible way curated your images, and now you leave them there for the community of experts or for anyone with expertise and knowledge and a desire to come in and contribute identifications that this person did 8 minutes ago. I want to find an example though of, okay, so now they have all been identified. I want to try something interesting for you to see too. Let's see, I think I'll try it with this. So I know this is a beetle, right? But I want you to show you what iNaturalist is capable of doing, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I'll leave it. We'll discuss that. So if you click here in the field that says species name, and do that now, it's going to load suggestions. So I'll read that out. We're not confident enough to make a recommendation, but here are our top suggestions, right? And so the top suggestion is not even a beetle, it's a scale insect. So it's the first top suggestion of iNaturalist for this little tiny beetle here. It's completely out of whack, right? It's not correct. And then it gives a whole bunch of recommendations. So this is an artificial intelligence approach to identification that some of you might have heard of. And you have to be really cautious with it, because the idea is to sort of guide you to potentially refresh your memory of a species that you might have known, or a name that kind of rings a bell, but you don't fully remember. Or in some cases, just to play around and say, okay, it might be that's fine. But it's not to say that you have to select any of these options as the correct option, right? That's not really the idea of it. So I'm going to give you another example where let's go into this one. See, that's really interesting. So this is, at least 2 people have really quickly, but look at that. in this case, iNaturalist was correct. It recognizes the genus, maybe because, you know, the coloration, the markings on the fly are more distinct, or potentially because they're just more records that the artificial intelligence can recognize, can use to recognize. So in that case, it would have been correct. But, you know, look at this one. It's suggesting other genus, other genera. They're definitely not that one species. I want to show you an example with a plant, for example. So this is one that I'm going to agree. And then we're going to see what iNaturalist does. So look, it's capable of finding the right genus, and the first recommendation is the actual species. So again, what I'm trying to get at is that maybe if you see this image, you say, oh, what's the name of that genus? I'm pretty sure I've heard it. If I heard it, I will recognize it if someone reminded me. So you can use the iNaturalist artificial intelligence to that. And then you see this and you say, that's it. I'm definitely sure it's chorea. And you can click on that option. So again, it's to try to kind of help you and not really decide for you or inform beyond the knowledge that you currently have of a given species. Excellent. I'll make a little less stop before the end here, and then I'll move to finish up with this last 2 points, 6 and 7.
Yeah, so we have a couple questions here. So first one is, can we upload photos from observations some years ago?
Yes, absolutely. So as I was showing before, you go up here to the upload option, and that would present you with the possibility of choosing files, sitting in your computer from whatever, right? So you would do that, and then you just choose your files, and it will give you the options of annotating it with the date and the time and the location, and then you can upload as many photos from the past. I spent years uploading photos from the past now that I have iNaturalist, and I love it. You go back to a trip that you have done at some point in your life, and you find those records, and you might have a photo of a flower, of a bird or whatever, and then you can, yeah, it's really fun to go and find old records and then make them public, right? Make them useful. It's a really powerful thing.
Awesome. So the next question is, when others are identifying something you submitted, what checks and balances are there that the identifier is correct?
Yeah, very, very good question. Let's try to find an example of that. I'm going to go to this explore option that I showed here. And immediately what happens here is that we get the most recent observations of taken across Australia. So I'm going to go to one that has been done. So I'm obviously uploaded a big batch of photos. Okay, so excellent. This is a very, I'm going to do this one. The eastern spinebill. For those of you familiar with birds, it's a species that should be easily identifiable, right? But people who know the species, right? So I showed you before that you need 2 identifications for it to become research grade, okay? So what happens if you come along, you see this observation and you think, no, that's definitely not, these 2 people are mistaken actually. I strongly believe this species is something else, right? So say that's me in this example. So that could be a bad thing and a bad thing. I'm going to go to suggest an identification. And then I'll use and so I think, oh, it's not the eastern spinebill, it's the western spinebill, right? I'll delete this in a second. I'm just using this as an example, as you can see how flexible the iNaturalist tool is. So the moment I select that, right, I'm a third person in this party, right? It says, I disagree with that. So there's a message for the other people saying, oh, someone disagree with you, right? And look what happened to the status of the record. It went from research grade to needs ID. And believe it or not, with the present day technology, very shortly, this record is going to be removed from, say, the Global Information Facility, because these tools are talking to each other, and they will send a message saying, oh, no, apparently that identification was not correct. So if you happen to be a research scientist doing actual research with these observations, it would actually knock this observation out, right? So what happens is that now, and I invite you to try this, if you're online and you can find this record, or maybe that's difficult because I just choose a random one, but if someone else were to come and then click and then reinforce the idea that it was the Eastern Spinebill, then the record would move again into research grade. But this time it needs 4. So while the first time it needed only 2, if there is one person who disagrees, the next time it has to be sort of 4 against 1, right? And if 2 people disagree and it becomes 4-2, then the next time it needs to be 6 against 1. So my point is, you get this sense of cumulative, which is what is indicated here. And it always has to be 2/3 to actually become a research grade. So that's the check and balance. It's a constant community approach, and it could be discussions about it, but at some stage there has to be some consensus and about the species identification for it to really be research grade.
Yeah, so I think that's all the questions for now, so we can keep on going.
Excellent. All right, so I think we actually covered this already. So what happens to my observation? So a little bit, because we had some cases where I was lucky that someone actually interacted, right, with my observation. So I go back here, and well, this actually happened before, right? So it was a strange case of someone interacting with my observation before I actually did. But that's what happens. People come and provide you with their best knowledge of what they think something is. It could be a species, it could be a genus, a family. And then with time, every one of your single observations should in time become a species level record when possible, when that knowledge is there, right? So as you can see, like what happened to my observations, where some of them have already been turned into species, genus, and these are all observations that I took last week that have been already identified to species. A garden snail that I saw going to pick up my son from school, a bird that I spotted out of my window in my office in Brunswick. Half an hour later, someone told me the species, some kind of ornamental plant that has been naturalized or growing spontaneously up in the Yarra Ranges last weekend. And so in time, most of your observations will slowly progress into species level and research grade, including audio recordings, which is what we were discussing before.
Just one question there on that topic, Lewis. So what prompts someone to know that a photo does need to be identified or confirmed?
Oh, sorry, could you repeat that?
So what does prompt someone to know that their photo needs to be identified or confirmed if it's been challenged, I suppose, the identification of it?
Well, one way that you get notifications, I'll show you up here. So this little red bubble here, this count progresses every time that anyone has interacted with your observations. So it's a way of saying, so for example, in the last few minutes, these are the last people that has interacted with my observations. And it tells you, okay, this person identified an observation for you. This other person identified an observation with someone else that you actually had interacted with. So if you contributed an identification, say a year ago, and you left it there, if anyone else interacts with something that you have interacted with, you'll get a notification. So say, for example, I'm going to go in, I'm curious about this one, right? I don't remember doing this. And so here you go. This is an interesting, see, this is another random observation. Someone uploaded this last year. And so the person who ID this indicated this superfamily. I came along and said, oh, I'm positive this is this genus. So this person then said, oh, okay, I now agree that that's that genus. And then a month after that, potentially this expert in this type of insects provided the actual species, and it was confirmed by someone else. So you can see how then now I'm prompted, because an hour ago someone confirmed that identification, and then I can come back and say, oh, great. Well, now I know the species, whereas before I only knew the genus. Now I can know what species that was. So yeah, you definitely get prompted every time that any changes in what things you have done or contributed to happen, and then you can interact with that further.
Thanks, Atlas.
Excellent. All right. So well, to finish it up and kind of like go full circle into the Melbourne BioBlitz, I want to show you how to join projects, because I think there's a lot of value in that aspect of iNaturalist, especially if you're participating in an event. And I say almost kind of like it's something that you have to do. If you're participating in the event, you will want to be joining the project of that event and then keeping track of the progress of the event. So let's learn how to, let me show you how to do that. I have this tab open here, already open with the project, the BioBlitz, but I want to show you how to actually get there. So if you click in the community menu up here, okay, and you go down to projects, then you can use this search option. So I have this one from last year, but I'm going to change. And there it is. Okay, so that's all you needed to do. Top Melbourne 2022 Biodiversity Blitz. And then you can go to kind of like the umbrella home screen, which is what I was showing you before of the project. So I'm already a member. So I'm one of these 14 members. Hopefully after this seminar, this number will be going up to 20 and 30. And that's why I don't have the option to join because I already joined, but for you doing this at home, you will see this bottom here will say join, and that's what you have to click. And so after you click that and you go back, and then you can just find the projects that you have joined very easily by doing community projects. I'll do that again. So you do community projects, for example, and then it just says manage your projects, and you can go back to those projects that you have become a member of and easily find them again, right? So as I was mentioning then, like today, after 12 and 4 hours, these numbers are going to start changing because people are going to be, probably some people are going to be like wanting to make the first observation of the BioBlitz sometime after 12. They're going to go outside, they're going to make a record, and then this number is going to change to 1, and that'll be the first record. And then obviously that will be the first species. And as soon as someone identifies it, that will be the first identifier and the first observer. So right now it's all kind of like very ready to go, but these numbers are going to change, and joining the project is a great way of keeping track of that. And so then each council that's participating also has a project. And right now this kind of like this tally, it's just alphabetically right now, but it would start changing as the different councils compete, so to speak, in the number of observations they have been taking. So let's actually join a project. I want to join my local council, Bayside. Oh, well, okay. So again, I already joined this project, but say you click there and then you can just join the project there. If I go back again, you just have to click, say you are in Greater Dandenong, and then this is the homepage just for Greater Dandenong, and you can join that too. And then you can also see how, and this doesn't have any dots but as the project progresses, this will be filled with dots, with red little dots indicating where the observations in Dandenongs have been taken. So anyway, I think joining the projects is a great way of keeping track. As you can see here, it's a countdown, three hours to go, which is pretty exciting. So this is kind of like wrapping up the whole presentation. This is a message from iNaturalist that I picked up from their website, Happy iNatting. I think it's pretty funny, but it's kind of like saying, I really hope that most of you, not all of you, are now more encouraged to go out there and make observations, whether to contribute to this event or to any other events. And I hope this is just the beginning of your iNaturalist journey. So thank you very much for your attention. And this is some people that I've been interacting across the years with various iNaturalist events. So thank you very much, everyone here. And special thanks to Vidi, Nicole, Suzanne, and Phoenix for organizing the event and for hosting me tonight. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lewis. Before you head off, we've got one more question. So how do you know that someone needs an identification to happen? So I suppose when you upload a photo and no one's identified it yet, is there a way that people are alerted to those new posts that go up that need to be identified? I think that's...
Yes, yeah, excellent question. So let me go back to, because that question it's such a good one. And it's something that I didn't cover, but it's something that gets asked quite frequently. So I just go into this observation that I'm going to delete anyway. So oh, excellent. Because look, the person who has been providing identifications, right? Identify this mock record for this kind of webinar, just an example, and said, you know, plants, it's obviously a plant. This is a flower arrangement, so there's obviously plants in there. And this person is asking, which one do you want identified? So it's a great example of this kind of interaction of, oh, you have a record, it's confusing to me. Can you please tell me more information? So I think to answer your question, this is exactly what you would do. You would talk to people in the platform, whether you leave a comment for them. So obviously you're interacting with your records and that's for you. But if you want someone to kind of like get back to you on something, that's when you start writing a comment. So before we were using the identification option, but now you use the comment option. And now effectively iNaturalist becomes your Facebook. It becomes your Twitter. It becomes your, what's the other one? Instagram. It becomes any one of these social platforms, right? So I'm going to talk to this person right now. I'm going to say, thanks. And then I hope we're all familiar with this sign, right? The @ sign symbol, which connects our emails and other things. And that's the way to talk to people. So now this person, yep. So now iNaturalist found this is, okay. So this is the person's username. And now I get his name, James. So I talked to James specifically, right? By using the symbol, this is going to prompt a notification directly to James. Someone is trying to talk to you. Thanks, James. This was just a demo for a webinar. Okay. So somewhere out in the world, James is getting a message from me saying, oh, that makes sense. Okay, sorry. You're likely to delete that. So this is it. So if you want to talk to someone, grab their username, use the @ sign and write something to them. Say, I'm participating in the, so you can write to me, right? @LMATA. Hi, I saw your webinar. I'm participating in the Biodiversity Blitz event. This is a record of an insect. Could you help me identify it, please? Thank you. And then I'll see it, and then I'll be more likely to interact with your records, given that you kind of like tried to get in touch with me directly. So exactly that's how you do it. You talk to your fellow community members, and you seek help, you seek advice, or you comment, and you create discussions. And this is kind of like a really rich platform to discuss biodiversity, local biodiversity, with people who have very similar interests than you.
Louis, I'd probably add that when you're in the mobile version, the app, it's a bit, obviously it doesn't have the functionality that website does, but when you've put a record in, you can, if someone makes a comment or a suggestion, the record will get a little red envelope on it. It's to be really obvious to yourself that someone's commented on one of your records, and there is a little observations feed that'll say, oh, so-and-so's commented. So, and that's an order of date. So you can see if this morning or last night or last week, someone's made a comment or a suggestion. And so you can interact with, it'll alert you if someone's added to your observations, I suppose. So it brings your attention to that. Because Lewis, how many have you got? 9 however many thousand observations, but if one from 5 years ago, someone comments on it, it'll pop straight to the top of your feed, alerting you that that's happened. So yeah.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks, Vinny. That's exactly it. It's a really, and again, I invite people to use this @ format because it really tags the person directly. Whereas sometimes if you just write on the comment, the person needs to go back to that one web observation to actually see it. So tagging people with their usernames, it's a really good way of being in touch.
I have a question, and it's one for Nicole. So it's Nicole, everyone's coming together with the citizen science to contribute to the records out there. And with Biodiversity Month, this Bio Blitz, what does that contribute for your work for City of Grand Dandenong? What does it contribute for yourselves and Louis, to yourself as well? What's some information that land managers can get to go from being just an observation on one of many million to something that'll be practical for on-ground works, I suppose, in your local government area?
Yeah, definitely. So part of my role is to increase, I suppose, habitat for certain species of animals which occur in Greater Dandenong or our surrounding, create linkages with our surrounding council. So for example, whether it's like a sugar glider or a platypus and something that's a bit more rare in the area, and we want to know where they're occurring and if there's like a barrier between the connectivity of that animal kind of moving along in a landscape. If I want to know if it's been spotted by any members of the public, I can look on iNaturalist and I can see if it's occurring, you know, just outside of Dandenong, or if there has been any occurrences in Dandenong that I might not know of personally myself or anyone in the community, because I suppose, you know, the more eyes the better that are looking out for these species. And if, you know, there's a few different locations where the species has been sighted, but there's a bit of a barrier preventing them from moving in the landscape, we can maybe focus our land management to increase habitat for that species to enable them to move through the landscape more easily. Or even another example is talking about like weed species. So you can, you know, take photos of any type of plants out there. And if I'm wanting to know if we might have an outbreak of a specific weed species, I can look on iNaturalist and search that weed species and see if anyone's spotted it in our council and if we might have to treat that. So yeah, it's definitely very helpful for our role as land managers.
Yeah, that's great. Anything you wanted to add to that, Louis, with what you do in some of the data that comes in or have done in the past?
Yeah, look, there's so many different pathways. An example that comes to mind, Nicole, when you were talking about invasive species or exotic species was there is about 4 years ago, we found in a citizen science activity, we found an introduced bug that wasn't documented in Australia before. So we were positive we were seeing the very first example of an invasive species or an exotic species in Australia, a species that had been recently introduced. And we searched online every single document that we could. And it was not only until we used iNaturalist that we found the species documented. And we went back and found the first record of the species in Australia. And it was beautiful because there was a person saying, what is this thing? And then someone discussed it and say, I think it's introduced. And then someone else said, oh, this is a European species. And then I identified it. And then now we basically tracked 4 years of the species from its first point of incursion to how it's spread all across metropolitan Melbourne and regional Victoria.
Wow.
And this whole science and this whole research and this whole practice around this exotic species has been thanks to iNaturalist users and records. So it's brilliant. It's just so many good examples out there of how we can use iNaturalist to do kind of fundamental science.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's great.
And even in 2019, we've got some data from we did our first collaboration So our knowledge of Indigenous species in the City of Greater Dandenong increased by 60%, and that was just with 27 people participating. So, which is a big difference.
Do we have any final questions, or not even questions, maybe just comments on how the presentation went and what you got out of it? I learned a lot personally. I learned a lot about the functionality of the full web page. So I've just been using it on my phone, which is easy to use, but not as much functionality. So you could whatever floats your boat in the time you've got. But yeah, you could do a lot through the browser, I think, if you've if you're that interested.
Yeah, I think it's really good to kind of use both, and they have, as you said, they complement each other really nicely. So yeah, it's good to kind of use a little bit of both.
Look, I think got a couple of comments come in, so it was helpful for me. Thank you from Sarah. Great presentation, very informative from an anonymous attendee, and Emma said, thank you. It's been excellent learning how your observations contribute to research, and they're coming thick and fast now, but lots of thank yous from Sue and from Anne. Anne's asked a question. I just tried to download the app and was asked for my credit card. I'm assuming you can skip that because I didn't put that in.
I don't ever recall, and there shouldn't be any credit card information asked. So I don't know. I would be
hesitant on
slightly
that.
concerned. My advice will be not to do any financial credit card information. That doesn't sound right. I'm sorry.
Might be worth doing that with someone else again, potentially, if that might be more familiar with that, because yeah, that doesn't ring a bell for me either, to be honest.
No. So to be very clear, it's a free open access tool, and the downloads, whether from the website or the app, should be totally free.
Yep. Yep. I'm really excited now. Louis, this is brilliant. I'm pretty curious to see if anyone's going to be up at midnight tonight for their first observation. I'm pretty sure it won't be me, but it'll be someone from this group, I hope. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Well, if you're awake at 12 and you are within range, then go out and take whatever observation, and you'll be the first record. Yeah.
There's plenty of nocturnal species out there to record.
I'm lucky where I am. We've got yellow-bellied gliders, so they're out. You can hear them in the evenings. It's great.
Well, thank you both so much for today. And I always say that it's so brilliant to see our councils, our local governments, and the individuals, brilliant staff at these organizations contributing to biodiversity and citizen science. So I applaud you for those efforts that you do and for organizing this event. And I just want to add that I am very excited this year because Bayside is participating, and I'm going to just have this connection that I want to go out and make observations locally, which, it's the whole Melbourne is quite local, but I think that being able to just go outside of my where I live and make observations is pretty exciting.
Yeah, I'm going to be into it tomorrow as well. I'm really excited. So thank you very much, Lewis. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, everyone, for coming. So as we leave the webinar today, there will be a quick questionnaire. Takes a minute to do. If you've got the time, that'll be appreciated. I think there'll also be a follow-up email with some links to your local projects, so you can click that to find that yourself quite easily. And yeah, good luck. Happy. What's the term? iNatting. Happy iNatting. Happy
iNatting.
And this has been recorded, so that will be I think we'll probably be emailing that out as well, but it'll be up online. But yeah, good luck with iNaturalist this month, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.